Hello, hello, my beautiful colleagues and friends on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Also, a pleasure to see you all. Join us here today again for another epic leadership power hour. And I have a great guest and great partner in crime here today in the studio. We have Helen joining us in this really hot topic and much needed conversation, which is how to make a lasting impact. I know so many of you are working so diligently and hard to make that happen individually, also as a team contributors, but also as organizations. And right now we're seeing some interesting trend happening that really not only prompting us to have this conversation, but also to really allow not only you guys to engage and ask questions, but share your perspectives because we need to address some of these elephants in the room, don't we, Helen? Welcome. Great to see you again.
We certainly do. Awesome to see you. These are always such exciting conversations and just really addressing some of the most important issues of our time. What is our legacy going to be? How do we lead and help a just and equitable future emerge? And so just thrilled to be here with you.
Absolutely fantastic. And it's great to have for everybody that didn't have a chance to hear Helen a few weeks ago. She obviously has not only phenomenal background, but she is so down to earth, humble and approachable, brilliant mind, always looks for solutions and what can we do to impact and improve. And as we know right now, when we're seeing 4.0 or 5.0 versions of certain things from innovation to technology, but also around organizations and people, right? How do we prepare ourselves to be better and lead in a better way, but also make decisions in a better way? So Helen, do you mind sharing what trends are you seeing, not only just as attorney, which that is huge umbrella, and that is definitely not a just, right? But also holistically as a powerful woman and someone who is so involved in human rights and also environment and overall vested interest on the better global platforms that we really want to not only today be part of, but also generations to come. What do you see?
I guess sort of the most interesting thing that I'm seeing is people beginning to really understand that their experience, their perspective, what they believe to be reality, that so much of that is constrained and informed by their own thinking, and that we impose boundaries and limitations on what we think is possible. Well, that can't be done, or I can't possibly do that, or this would never happen. And what the pandemic and any number of things that are happening in our world today show us is that there's so much that is possible, and that really we are limiting ourselves by thinking that we can't do things because they're impossible. And that to me what's so exciting about these conversations with you is really exploring these boundaries and looking over the horizon and seeing what new things can emerge that we thought were impossible, but they were only impossible because we weren't willing to pursue them because we didn't think they were possible. For example, I'm a lawyer. And if you said in February of 2020 that every single law firm in the country was going to have to be able to go remote in 2 or 3 business days, the legal industry would have said, no, we need 5 years to plan. It can't possibly be done. That is just not possible. And COVID hit, and law firms went remote in 2 days. The law firm I was with, we went in on a Monday, and by Wednesday, we weren't going into the office anymore. And the idea that you could only be effective by being in the office and working in a certain way just got thrown out the window. And now you have people, major law firms, talking about hybrid work going forward for people. And it really shows on the issue of equity for people who are disabled and who have been looking for remote access, who've been looking for hybrid work, who've been looking to work from home, and who were told just, no, that's just not possible. We can't do that for you. Well, yes, you can. And yes, we are. And there's so much, like, that's just one teeny example of something that seemed impossible that wasn't impossible at all if you had to do it. And so I think this idea of sort of, where do we want to lead? How do we want to show up? What do we want our impact and legacy to be? And to really think about what we can do that's going to be different, to not just keep replicating the same old, and really create something just exciting and different and supportive of life.
I love your perspective, and you pick up one of the hardest one that has the most regulations, right? Which is legal background and legal system, and then to expand even court system and everything else beside the law firms that is related to it went to also Mission Impossible, right? And it very quickly adopted and changed. And when we see when such an industry can do that, and now they're contemplating different ways of being and different ways of doing, we have a great precedence what kind of other organizations and industries can do, and create that more flexibility, as you were mentioning. But also, I love that you stressed about equity. What I'm also seeing, Helen, and I don't know if this is just also the regional thing or national or international, but people are definitely having new habits. Habits dramatically change, where the quality of time and now be more strategic. If we're commuting, where we're going and why we're going, can we avoid it? How can we also make it that more effective? What can we also avoid just from convenience, but also practicality and accessibility to others, so that we can do what we have to do in person and what we can still do remotely, as you mentioned, hybrid model, but also, push envelopes even further, right? How do we continue to nurture our interpersonal relationships? What do you see happening from that standpoint, and how do you navigate that?
Well, that's really interesting. Another group that I'm part of is a nationwide networking group. And their historic format was in-person meetings, 7 to 9 a.m. once a month. And you could guest and visit and go to other meetings, but the meetings were all in person. And they had started to move to having a few of what they call affinity groups be virtual. And that was another group. They had to go, they were completely in person, flipped a switch, went to fully remote on no notice, something that if you had asked them ahead of time, they would have said that can't possibly be done. And now, and I've only been involved in this group for a little less than a year, but I'm going to be, we're starting up with another woman. We're starting, and they've allowed us in this group to start 100% virtual group. We're never going to be in person for this networking group. We will have social events that might be in person, but for us, there's any number of people still in the group that are like, we need to get back to normal. We need to be back in person. But so many of us are saying, well, we don't need all of these to be in person. We can be, just as you were, we can be strategic. So let's have certain meetings with certain people can be in person, but it's so much more efficient to be meeting remotely. And I also think that there was recently in the last month or so, there was an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, and it was some Wall Street guy telling people basically like all these Wall Street people needed to just get back in the office and like learn at the feet of their elders and stop talking about this remote work. But some of what you learn, or what these in-person meetings, especially in my field, the legal field, it's about how to dominate conversations, how to be basically how to take up more space, how to get your way, how to influence people. And the Zoom meetings are much more equitable. You don't get talked over. Only one person can talk at a time. It's very clear sort of who's getting, if someone does get interrupted. And there's a lot less of these sort of microaggressions and things. And for disabled people, even, the worries of how they're going to get to these in-person meetings. But it's really just a different experience. And for some people who are used to being very dominating and taking up a lot of space and being at the table and spreading out and sort of having, this sort of physical sense of presence, which worked for them, but was intimidating to many other people. When everybody gets the same size box on Zoom, it's truly for certain people, that's a much more comfortable environment. It might not be for, people who are accustomed to a different way of being, but that has been really interesting to watch that unfold. Again, sort of like the law firms that said, oh, we couldn't do it. This group would say, oh, we couldn't do that. And then now the shift is for this new group that we're focused on, is really trying to have that be more equitable and make more sense. And I think there's a lot of, shift in that direction.
I love it. And you spot on, it's not anymore that power play posturing and taking the seat at the table or top seat at the table or head of the table, as you said, and also trying to create that self-importance and imposing on the others. And as you said, sometimes those intimidation tactics, right? But people do that a lot of times still, even from their own insecurities or just because they wanted to be valuable. And that is opposite, because if you're already valuable, you don't have to prove it that way. It's going to be very evident that you're valuable based on the value you produce and give to others. And what I love about these opportunities right now, we're connecting with colleagues around the world. And this gives us chance to partake and equally have a pulse what's going on in Asia, what's going on in Middle East, what is going on in other parts of the world, not just in our little bubble or our own city or state or rest of the country, right? We have a really great question here that Niloy is asking. Niloy, thank you so much for joining us. And I love the question you're asking, Helen. With so much international workers, especially in Asia and LATAM, how do we ensure compliance for company policy as well as labor laws to address and dispute this? So that is a really powerful question. Helen.
Well, yeah, we live in a very interconnected world, but yet the regulations and the sort of governing rules in different jurisdictions are varied. And so you're going to have, if you had an international company with locations across, around the globe, you have to think of, what are your general company policies of sort of universal application, and then how that, and looking at any location where people are physically located to make sure you're complying with that jurisdiction's rules. And then to the extent you have employee disputes, sort of what rules are going to govern that. For instance, I have one client, they're based here in Massachusetts. They had an employee who lived in Massachusetts who moved to Australia and is working in Australia. They took the employee who was an employee and called him an independent contractor, and he's in Australia. Well, what are the rules about that? Like, what are the Massachusetts rules about that? What are the Australia rules about that? Is having this worker, even though you've titled him as not an employee, does that create a permanent establishment in Australia or not? And I think there's going to be even more of that as people are more flexible and can work more remotely with this turn to virtual or hybrid working environments. So there's a lot to think about, and it really requires sort of both coming at it from both directions, sort of top down from the company. What are the international policies? What's the biggest level policy? And then from the bottom up, like from where the actual employees are, what are those rules? And trying to make sure, it's kind of like building a train that's meeting in the middle, like train tracks. Like, are they going to line up, and have you aligned everything so that from top to bottom, it's all consistent?
I love it. And such a great question. And we're also having here Anthony, who is phenomenal sales guy who has actually great, not only programs, but the ways how he actually deals with these negotiations, objections, even from the clients when they're trying to make a decision, not only what to invest, but also in who to invest. And that obviously changed so much. We also have obviously Niloy that just asked a great question, that is joining us from India, who is also running his really successful enterprise. We have Daisy that is joining us here, Samrab, Galina, she's joined us from Europe. Great to see you, and hopefully you can join after your kids go to bed. I mean, it's just so wonderful to see all of you great guys here. But I just want to make sure, again, as we are progressing this conversation, don't hesitate to ask questions, because the questions are definitely here for you to ask and be involved in conversation and discussions as we move forward. So with all of this, what is going on, this is really interesting too, because as from global business management, right, and understanding globalization factors, even a decade ago, I always said will come the time when we will have competing for local jobs global talent. And when will not be as relevant, are we bringing somebody in? Do we need to deal with immigration, with the visa? But in the same time, when we will be able to tap into different people's skill sets and expertise, and that's going to create a lot of ripple effect, and obviously important to stand out individually with our skills and who we are as a people, with our quality of human that we are, right? And how then we bring that into dynamics of team, dynamics of organization, and frankly, dynamics of the world. And right now we're seeing that, and for a lot of people that is great advantage, great opportunity, right? And then we're also seeing others that are just not catching up. They're feeling, fearing for their jobs, for their positions, for longevity, for strategy, but they're not adjusting the game. And a lot of interesting power dynamics are happening as a result of it, right? So I'm curious, what are some of your thoughts with that? Because I feel like that is going to stay. It's not going to go away. And how do we then individually look at how to create that impact then as a team member and as an organization that's going to truly create a positive ripple effect?
Well, that's the $1 million or $64,000 question. And and working so sort of one of the concepts that I focus on is and I just saw the comment here about cultural diversity, that the culture eats strategy for lunch. And culture is the underlying, it's the water to the fish, it's the background, it's invisible. The point of culture is you don't see culture. It is presented, where we sort of started this conversation, as just what is possible. And then we have, and culture, I believe our society and our structures emerge out of the culture. So they are not, there's often these ideas of sort of people talk about like, well, they this and they that. And it's like, well, who's the them? Who's the they? Who's the, the boogeyman behind this? And I think there's a lot of things that happen that there's no coordination, like COVID. Nobody went out and coordinated how COVID was going to happen and how that was going to unravel. It just emerged. And culture is the baseline. And then the organizations are arising out of this soup of culture. But when you are trying to create strategy or leadership, how am I going to lead a team? How am I going to lead individually? How am I going to make the impact I want? You can't, the other way I would describe this is you can't outperform structure. So if I have a broken bike, I can pedal as fast as I want, but if the tire's broken, I can't exceed that negative, that drain on my performance. Like the structure doesn't work. So and culture is sort of like the framework, the structure that we're operating in. And so really understanding that, and understanding that anyone's individual experience of something is really informed by their whole history. And because everything's comparative, everything's in relationship. No one exists alone. It's all in connection with society and culture. And so really being aware that different people are having different experiences, that you don't know what anyone's internal experience is like, and trying to me, I think the sort of guiding force behind all of this is what what makes people feel like they're coming alive. And when we feel like we're coming alive, then we're part of this emergent process, and we're growing, and it's life affirming, and then the things that make us feel truly like oppressed or pushed, like stressed, the pressure to, if it's a cork that wants to pop up, that you keep holding it down, that sort of energy is not life affirming. It's not everything's working together. It's not making you feel great. So that it can seem very complex, like everything's hyperly complex right now. And that this idea but that there are ways of navigating that we don't think of. We think we can, rely, I'm a lawyer, on your intellect, on your mind to tell you the right way to go. But it really has to be coming from this centered, connected place that then you bring in the sort of more rational type intelligence, but that the foundation coming from this place of connectedness and a desire to ultimately be life affirming instead of extractive, exploitive, domination, hierarchy, and control, that those are just two very different energies. And when we shift to this other expansive energy, that's what, to me, that's the only place that you can create something new and different and make an impact and legacy. The other type stuff, it's just reproducing, replicating from an existing pattern, but it's not new, and it's not creative and sort of clean. It's a replication and like a mimeograph copy that keeps getting degraded, versus connecting to this more expansive energy.
That is so powerful, and I love the way you framed it, because if we're realizing that some things are not working, they're not effective, why to continue doing them from that place, right? So why not to disrupt it? Why not to allow to look at it and test it out and create something? And I love what you also said, if strategy gets eaten by culture for breakfast. I mean, that's very true. And if but right now I'm seeing some phenomena that is not happening many times in the past, at least not in my professional career, where we have simultaneous demand and need to adjust strategy as we're also working on the culture and then figuring out the next steps, just because that framework and overall test and practical application, because of sense of urgency, because of speed, and frankly, as you mentioned earlier, level of crisis, right? Level of intervention that is needed from leaders, decision makers, and just in general, demands and drives that customers and clients are pushing forward, right? And everything else that we're seeing happening on global scale. So we're also seeing here Camilla's comment around emotional intelligence and multicultural diversity, as we're talking about, and integration around, which I honestly cannot agree more. But what really is missing here a lot of times, Helen, I'm curious what you think about it, because we're talking always from the top tier legacy umbrella, right? That encompasses and any of the leadership moments that are happening throughout, right? And opportunity to have that interaction and conversation. And what I'm seeing a lot of times, we don't need to just be intelligent now emotionally, and that everybody wants to increase that, which is phenomenal. It's much needed. But if you don't have capacity, because intelligence just gives you more intellectually ways and emotional ways to deal with situation. But if your threshold and capacity is very small, you're not going to ever be able to do this to the level that requires, and specifically that requires in current time. So I always argue emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence needs to have also intellectual and emotional capacity. And what's now missing, and what I want to stress so much, is social intelligence and social capacity. Because what's going on emotional with me, it's one thing, and how do I come across, but now how do you come across to me that will be reflection how I'm going to adjust so I can socially accommodate, include, and maximize you and your capabilities and who you are as an individual and the rest of the team and everything else. We're also having Craig here joining us. Thank you so much. Reinvention architect, which is right in your alley, Craig, this conversation, because we need to have the reinvention. We need to have a new architecture, as just Helen was talking about, and new frameworks so that we can be able to effectively engage. And for everybody here watching and listening, please go check out Craig's profile, connect with him, Camilo, Anthony, and others, all phenomenal people around the world that are doing some really great work to help not only businesses to thrive with their skill sets, but also to ride on this positive disruption, right? Because while we want to just the disruption for sake of disruption, we wanted to do it something that is going to create that impact that everybody wants, right? But that impact comes in so many forms and shapes. And do you mind sharing some of the things you've seen, Helen, how that impact looks like? And what that feels like, how is that important from your standpoint, again, as this super powerful woman that is lawyer, environmentalist, that cares about people, that also connects with people on such a profound level, and it's also strong, powerful leader that already built her legacy. And for everybody to know about Helen's background, she did something that was thought to be impossible, and with so much pushbacks, she managed to prevent fracking in the whole state of New York. Huge undertaking, and something that many people never even saw coming, nor let alone had a quote unquote standing chance. And look at how she shaped something that's going to impact generations to come, and that impact that's going to last and positively obviously shape and influence other states and other parts of the world.
So, well, just terrific questions, Izabela, and this conversation and the questions people have been asking and the audience participation is just tremendous. So thank you to everyone who's participating in this, because I think we need to be able, the very first step in anything is imagination. You have to be able to visualize and imagine where you're going to end up if you're going to have a chance of getting there. If you can't imagine it, if you don't think it's possible, if you don't have a vision for it, the vision isn't enough. The imagination isn't enough. But that's the first step. Mm-hmm. And that requires, you talked about reflection. That requires I feel like our society, in part because and you talked about social intelligence. The purpose of any society is for that society to continue, and for you to not question the foundational rules of that society, to accept the society as is, and for you to figure out how to fit into it, not for you to figure out how to change it. And so most of us are taught how to fit in to a society, but not how to change it. And it's for good reason. The sort of powers that be, the emergent structures of society, want to maintain that, in the law, they talk about investment-backed expectations, and, everything's supposed to be reasonable rules that we have. And so the first step is you have to be at a point, if you're going to try to make an impact and leave a legacy, the first step is you have to be in a spot where you feel physically, emotionally, psychologically safe to take a breath, stop, and think. Mm-hmm. And much of our culture doesn't want to provide us with that opportunity. And that's like the number one way that we get stuck in a culture, is because we're all busy just trying to make ends meet. When you referenced the fracking fight, and part of what happened, and when we had just a tremendous result there, but there were lots of people, you'd go to them and they're like, yeah, this sounds terrible, but I got to get my kid to soccer. I got to work 3 jobs. This is just too esoteric for me. It's not immediate enough for me to want to actually do something about it. I have needs I need to fill. And that's one way that we're kept from really making an impact and consciously creating something we want, because we don't have that space. And which also could be thought of as capacity. And you mentioned the need for capacity. And then I think the second step is the social intelligence, the societal intelligence. When we went, and so back to just to use the fracking story as an example, we were told fracking's coming. It was New York, upstate New York, 2009. We're told fracking's coming to New York. There's nothing to talk about other than how to regulate fracking. That's the only thing on the table. And I asked a different question. I said, how do we ban fracking? And everyone said, you can't ask that question. That question, the big green group said you can't ask that question. Turns out because they were getting money from the natural gas industry to fight coal, but they were concerned about losing their seat at the regulatory table, appearing unreasonable. And so we had to figure out how to bypass even what, like, our, on the spectrum of allies, like our closest possible allies were like, well, no, we're in the business of regulating bad things. We're not in the business of stopping bad things.
Yeah.
And so I went out and studied rural sociology. How do you get people to adopt new ideas? And we looked at what they've figured out about how farmers adopt new ideas. And it turns out, when the U.S. was trying to get farmers to be more productive, they didn't go out and try to talk to each farmer individually. They went and they picked the biggest farmer in the biggest, state, and they got that farmer to change. And then they got, then they create, because ultimately our desires are all mimetic. We hear about memes and things, but we desire things because we're taught to desire them because other people desire them. And so we basically created mimemic desire by going out. So we conducted educational campaigns across upstate New York, but we said we need to do everything possible to get 2 or 3 towns to, our idea was using local laws to ban fracking and then leverage that, which we did. But get 1 or 2 people, in this case, 1 or 2 towns to pass these laws. And then that's going to, the whole ripple effect. Everyone's going to want this. It's going to become like, why don't we have a ban in our town versus and so trying to create that. So I think if you're trying in an organization to make change, if you're wherever you are, having enough allies to be on board with whatever your vision is, creating some excitement about that so that other people want to be a part of that. And that begins to, and looking at that, that the way that we work in society or socially is the lever for how to make, like, that's how you make the impact. All by yourself, if you're going out and you're just hammering on nails and, pounding things, that's not helping to grow something new and expansive and different. And that's, I think, done in collaboration. It's done through culture. It's through sort of going back to the soup. And instead of the things that are coming out of the soup, like looking at, not trying to fix the cake that you forgot to put the sugar in the recipe, go back and fix the recipe in the first instance. And so I think that's some of how we can, through reflection, through working with others, through having this understanding of sort of how we work as humans in an interconnected fashion, is the real foundation for a truly impactful legacy and creating something new. Legacy being something new and different. It wasn't the default. It wasn't what anyone expected. You create that through this looking forward, creating the space, working with other people. And it's a whole, it's not skills. It's not linear. It's not, here's the pathway. There's no master to tell you how to do this. Like, to create something new, it has to come out from you.
I absolutely love it, what you just shared, Helen. And for everyone that is joining, that is listening, that is commenting, thank you, Leah, coming back. Amberdeen, absolutely great to see you. Thank you for sharing that. And it's such a great thing from Liga that she pointed out how much presence and seeing the woman being not only cherishing and supporting each other, but also embracing and showing what's possible. And I really wanted to say that you have been inspiration for us as well, Liga and Berdine, and everyone else on this session that just joined us, because as Helen said, if we don't look at things from a new, fresh perspective, or if we don't take our walls down, we might be solving completely wrong issue, or believe, as we started our conversation, that a lot of things is not possible. And first of all, we need to understand that we live in a world of possibilities, first of all, within ourselves, but also in a world of possibilities that we then now can influence and impact and create in our teams, organizations, and of course, snowballing in the world. Amberdeen, you probably know more than anybody that, because you are focusing on mental health counseling and focusing on well-being and what that also means when we're having great positive mindset, right? Then possibilities are endless. Now back to Noloy's question and where we're going with this segment of this conversation, with this leadership power hour, is that if we always look for the blueprint, we're going to miss other opportunities. We'll strip things down. But if we're looking for ingredients, which is different than the blueprint, what that takes to create this lasting legacy, first of all, the deep passion, desire, leveraging your education, your skill sets, unique interests, right? Like in Helen's case. And then believe in yourself, that when even somebody says this is not even question, that is not even the right conversation, or this is not even angle where we're going. And then for her to stand up and still ask the questions and question choices, decisions, and look at why we're limiting to look at things from clean slate and look at what's possible, right? She will never be able to do what she did. And how important it is to have people with shared vision, people that will jump on board, want to support you because they know how amazing you are, and they know what are you standing for. They know your values. They know your leadership DNA. And as a result, now they're willing to put their neck out and put things in perspective and say, okay, this might not be necessarily the most pressing thing for me, but because Helen cares and it's important to her, I'm jumping in to support her. And that's how every single transformation happens, guys, specifically on a larger scale. But now when you ripple that with such amazing legacy and things to remember for, we have such a great opportunities. So now why I'm bringing this up is opportunity that we're seeing also that Noah is asking, because he's seen so many challenges already, right? And so many regulations and in terms of research, contracts, etc. And it's also coming back to some really interesting stuff around privacy data, HIPAA. We understand that specifically different markets and segments of the globe operate under different standards. But ultimately, what are we doing to still be regulated in a healthy way, but not to kill the creativity and opportunity to problem solve on complex issues? Two different things, right? What are your thoughts, Helen?
So yes, although at the end of the day, everything's connected. So the all of this, what's happening with COVID, our responses to COVID, the way that people in society are interpreting COVID. I talked a bit earlier about how everyone has their own perspective and is actually digesting and looking at information through a filter. We sort of think that we don't have filters, or that we're objective and we're not biased. But we can see through that so many people can look at the exact same thing and see something totally different. And so that's, one of these sort of good news, bad news situations but I think that what the best lesson for me out of all of this, and just on a sort of technical issue, there aren't the laws in the US on sort of there's no federal privacy law. There's the HIPAA applies only to sort of regulated insurance agencies, and not if you were to give me your personal health information and I had that somehow, I'm not covered by HIPAA. So like there's not it's a very complex sort of regulatory, these structures that we're operating in, and whether there's going to be vaccine passports and how contact tracing works and all. Those are all these various ingredients and sort of how we're going to navigate through this. But to me, the ultimate issue from this is seeing, again, how much of what we think is just reality is a thought construct and is changeable, and that we could have that what we're really seeing are our reactions to something, and it's less about sort of the thing itself and more about how differently we're interpreting what's happening around us, which I think points to this idea of really, we have a whole there's a whole horizon in front of us, and what are we focusing on? Where are we putting our energies? What are we looking at? Where are we headed? And do we want to be, for me, it was like, do I want to still be fighting about fracking, or do I want to be talking about how to create an inclusive, just, and equitable future for people? And shifting to that, to really have the discussion being about where do we want to go? How do we create a world that supports life? Right now, we're having the failure of both our social structures and the biosphere at the same time because they're interrelated. But those failures are happening, and it's a clarion call to ask, like, well, what are we going to do? Do we want to create societies that are supportive of life, that are supportive of justice, equity, and inclusion, that want to make humanity survive? And thinking about how we do that, and whether in our role as an employee, what we're doing helping to make the world a better place? Is it neutral? Or is it bad, but we figure, well, I made some money doing it, like it worked for me, like, yeah, not so hot, but, and trying to shift from the, I don't really care, and, it is what it is, I can't possibly make a difference, to this collaborative vision of really demanding better. And that's a lesson also we learned in the fracking fight. We would go to towns and at the very localist of governmental levels, but it's true across the board. We sort of think that person's been elected, they're going to do the right thing, or I can count on them. And every elected official will tell you, basically, we do what you make us do. We don't move in any particular direction without being pushed. And you have to push us to do the right thing. And we have to push and demand better for ourselves. And we're seeing some of that in the people who are just like, yeah, like that crappy job, I'm not doing it anymore. And like, it's not worth it to me. And as we shift that and start to demand better, we will get better. And just feeling that sense of entitlement and worthiness and the courage to stand up to what society, it's an emperor has no clothes moment. Like, we're taught to, oh, look at if you can't see the emperor's clothes, you're just not smart enough. No, the guy's naked. And, so trying to really see that and not feel like self-doubting and like, who am I to speak up? And, we're all so powerful, and really any one of us can start to lead this level of change.
Wow, so encouraging, so stimulating and inspiring, guys. If you're not inspired, at least by at least 50% before you arrived and started listening to this ad. And I don't know what else you guys are waiting for. I'm so inspired because I love just that, again, goes back to every single with us, right? And the power that we carry, the knowledge that we carry, and the more we need to trust our own instincts. But just because we're not affected directly with so many issues, it doesn't mean also we should just wait and just wait to things play out, or play small and safe, or forget what's going on in other parts of the world, because we're more than ever interconnected, and anything that is affecting different parts of the world right now, it's going to affect us sooner or later. I was just had a chance to speak with someone in UK, and then looking from perspective what's going on in Asia and Middle East, and also Latin American countries, how much we're already anticipating issues with broken supply chain, with material that is not able anymore to be produced, how much certain products we will be missing on our regular shelves, how much of delays we're going to have in order to get access to certain things, even though we think things are moving ahead. But it's like now where it's bringing so many new solutions, right? Because we're seeing so much complexity of the problems. So what kind of solutions that we can start paying attention to? And it's so interesting to also see, it's like before you start seeing the fire, because fire is so far out, you don't think it's going to affect you. We also had a phenomena that nobody expected. We had fires happening earlier in the summer, 5 states away. And Colorado got the wind and was the most toxic state in the whole entire world. Our toxic city, Denver, was for 3 days in whole entire world for fire that was not even happening in Colorado. Let that sink, guys. So if we think just because something is happening somewhere else, we cannot afford any more that way of thinking. Definitely not in the leadership positions, not definitely if we want to create a meaningful legacies, and if we want to make some improvements that we desperately need today. If we're waiting, things are going to get much more challenging and difficult, and some things will be impossible to reverse. And not playing under dramatization, but that is reality. So if we're up really caring, what do we stand for, right? What do we truly genuinely care? And are we having the guts, the balls, the opportunity to stand up and say, this is what's important to me, and I am going to do what it takes to make that happen, to find the allies, as Helen was mentioning, to find the right strategic partners, to question some choices and decisions in a diplomatic way, but yet still impose those questions. What would happen if Helen did not ask the questions? And even when she was told that is not even an option and those questions shouldn't be asked. What would happen if she did not go outside of the meeting and continue to question and look at other options and possibilities? She will never find a solution. She will never find an ally. She will never find the case to build upon on something tremendous. But what she did is she trusted herself. She trusted her gut. She had a courage. She knew that she has to do something about it, because you don't get born or wake up just the middle of the night and say, oh, what can I do now today to change the world? And this is how I'm going to do it, right? You have to have a deep desire. Something had to matter to you. And the bigger question is, what does matter to you guys? So any comments before we wrap up conversation for today for this session? I can't believe it's already getting to the top of the hour, because I want to make sure that we're leaving with something very actionable and things that matter to you, the path, that the ingredients Helen figured out for herself that are easily actually replicated. So Helen, do you mind sharing some of those steps when you tap into that, your own compass, your own drive, your own deep desire to do something about that really bothers you, that is important to you, that you value tremendously? What would you recommend for them to do?
So just a terrific question, and just a great conversation, and so many wonderful people in the audience, and the questions that are being asked. I think that the very first sort of step, but if in having sort of and making really making a difference on this is to first look inward. And I think we often rush out and we think the problem is somewhere else. We're not the problem. The problem is just if more people were like me, we wouldn't have any problems. Like I need to go out and make people be more like me instead of, and like I have suffered from that belief that like if just people could think like me, it would be great. But we're all individual pieces in a puzzle, and we're each bringing something different. We're all connected. I have props. We're all connected. Everything is part of this interconnected whole, but we're each our own individuated point. And from each point in my sphere it has a different view. And when you understand both, and that's the sort of moving beyond duality, we live right now in an either or world. And when we can see that life is complex, that it's paradoxical, that I can see one thing, I can see a 6, you can see a 9. And we could argue all day long about whether what I see as a 6 is a 9 or not. But if you're on the other side of the table from me, it's a 9 and I'm seeing a 6. But if I don't understand that things are connected and that things look different from a different place, I'm going to spend a lot of time and energy arguing with you rather than accepting that you have a different perspective. And when we come from this sense of connected and wholeness, individualized, yes, individuated, but part of and connected to everything, then you can begin to figure out how to shift what's emerging out of the everything. And when you don't have that sense of connection, when I think you're the problem and I'm the solution, I just create more problems.
Yes.
And you wind up in this circle, like the red, one name for it's the Red Queen effect, where, Alice chases after an Alice in Wonderland. She runs out, she's running around and the queen's running around and they're chasing. And they wind up right back where they started. And that's what we do when we don't sort of take that pause and reflect and connect to this whole piece. And then you're able to really, then when you're coming from this place of understanding you are connected to everything, that energy is attractive energy. When you think you're different from everyone else, it's like a magnet. Like, so I can have one end of the polarity of my magnet. And when I'm using my magnet to push what I don't want, that's totally different than when I am attracting and magnetizing and being present for what I do want. And this connection and radiating out of the positive energy, first and foremost, is what leads to people wanting to help you, people wanting to enlist, people wanting to join that because it feels good and it's life affirming. And that shift, I think that your state of being is the single most important determinant of how everything's going to turn out. And that is the very first step.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And specifically, as you mentioned, how do we get everybody on board? And we're having so many beautiful people here joining us, like Saeed from Pakistan, Liga is joining us from Peru, Zahra is joining us from Middle East. We have Niloy joining us from India, Amberdeen, I believe also somewhere in the Middle East. I'm sorry, Amberdeen, can't remember exactly which country. We have a Craig joining us from States, Camilo, I believe it's also joining us from State. Anthony, it's been in multiple different countries that I know, right? But point is, we're having an amazing group of individuals here that I just want to highlight how we connect now, not only on the global level, but we connect also on the levels of things because we do care. We resonate with the topic, we resonate with the speaker, we resonate with the conversation, and we have a deep desire, deep down, to really make that tremendous difference. So I just want to say again, thank you for everyone for participating, showing up. Please make sure you check each other's profile, connect. but also learn, because every single one of you have amazing mission. Oh, from Costa Rica. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I, for some reason, thought it's Peru. Thank you. But I wanted just to say it's so important to find the ways we can create these beautiful ripple effects. And that first step is just the Helen shared, that if we do lay out foundation very well, everything else will start building so well on its own, organically, because other people will come, other people will start asking question, right? Other people want to engage, and then frankly, they want to be part of it. Everybody wants to be part of the winning team, winning organization, and something that is meaningful. Right now, more than ever, people are seeking meaning. And then obviously that meaning that translates into impact, that impact that translates into something that's going to last, which ultimately it is that legacy. How can I create a legacy my lifetime while I'm still alive, not when I die, not centuries later? And then how do I create that impact on most pressing challenges and issues that humanity is facing right now, environment is facing right now, right? That we see on the larger global scale. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And anything else, Helen, you want to share in closing?
Just thank you so much, Izabela. These truly, and for everyone who has participated and been here, we are creating and imagining and creating this space. You talked before about the space, creating the space for something new. You know, there has to be room for that. And these conversations are pointing us towards how do we do that. No one teaches us how to do this. It's not in the interest of society, as we've talked about, to tell us how to change it.
Exactly.
But that's what we need to do. And educating each other, and in collaboration and in dialogue, figuring out how we can support each other. What does make us, you know, when I talk with you, what makes you're like, oh yes, Helen, that sounds great, versus things you're like, yeah. And how do we keep following and aligning with the stuff that makes us feel like we're coming alive? We should feel that way. That shouldn't be a once every a while that we feel that way. Like, that's our birthright, to feel alive and engaged, and we're living a life of meaning, and it matters. And so thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you, Rosa. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We will be doing these on regular weekly basis and look forward to more interaction. We'll keep you posted on next topic. Welcome to share some questions you have or things you'd like us to address. But as Helen said it, we're disrupting even the thinking process as well as topics and what is possible, because it's not in everybody's interest to have this, because sometimes it's easier just to deal with the old paradigm. And as we know, old paradigms are not working. So let's just do some bold strides and make magic happen together. And thank you, Adam. Great to have you with us. Guys, please check out everybody's profile and connect with Adam. He's doing some really great work. Rosa, Liga, Saeed, Zahra, and everybody else that just generously commented, asked questions, and also spent 1 hour of Leadership Power Hour with us today. Cheers, my friends. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.